Hi, my name is Tim with the law firm Denton Peterson. I practice employment law, and our firm practices generally business and employment law. Recently, the Department of Labor passed new regulations regarding overtime pay and who can be exempt from overtime. I think for everybody to understand exactly what this new regulation means, we need to take a step back. The Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA, says that for any employee who works over 40 hours in a work week, they're entitled to overtime pay, which is time and a half. The law has actually outlined certain exemptions that are available to employers to exercise on certain employees. For instance, an administrative exemption, executive exemption, and other similar types of exemptions. Some have heard of outside sales exemptions, computer employee exemptions, and things like that. For the purpose of this regulation, however, it does not focus on the job duties portion of the exemption. It focuses on the salary level of the exemption that is required. So it used to be that under the Fair Labor Standards Act, if you wanted to exempt an employee from overtime pay, they had to not only meet their job duties, as I previously discussed, but also there had to be a threshold salary amount paid to that individual. For instance, for an administrative employee, it was just above $24,000 a year that was required. The new regulations going into effect have actually doubled, or slightly more than doubled, some of these salary exemption thresholds. For instance, for an administrative employee now, the employer has to pay over $47,000 a year in order for that individual to be exempt from overtime. This can be a huge impact on a lot of employers and can be a cause for great joy for some employees. However, there are certain things that employers have started to discuss doing in order to avoid having to bump up the salary for certain employees. Something that is important to remember for employers is that under the law, it is their responsibility to track the number of hours that an employee works. So if there's a dispute later on about whether or not somebody worked 40 hours in that work week, it will be the employer's responsibility to show proof of time records that they did not work over 40 hours in that work week. The damages under the Fair Labor Standards Act are quite severe. For an employee who has worked over 40 hours in a work week and not paid overtime correctly, the employer is required to pay double damages and attorney's fees to that employee. Sometimes these attorney's fees can far exceed the amount of damages that are actually awarded and can be the driving force for some of the claims that are brought. In order to avoid these negative consequences for your business, it is important to keep the accurate time records to make sure that the employees are properly classified either as exempt or non-exempt from overtime. And then from there, if you have questions, you can contact an attorney. If you need help navigating these new regulations, or you're just concerned about regulations that are already in existence, whether an employee is exempt or non-exempt from overtime, please contact the law firm Denton Peterson, and we'd be happy to help.